good evening everyone, and happy Thursday. My name is Jameson Freeman, and I am the president of the Arts Club of Washington, the most historic arts nonprofit organization in our nation's capital. We have been so blessed to have both Dr. Laurel Victoria Gray and the Tai Soon Burgess Dance Company perform in our historic space, which is not too far from where we are here. And it is my honor to introduce them both this evening. An award-winning choreographer, costume designer, scholar, and performer, Laurel Victoria Gray. Dr. Laurel Victoria Gray combines her degrees in history with decades of field research and performance experience. She studied history at Occidental College, the University of Waterloo, and the University of Washington, where she received her doctorate, and was awarded an honorary doctorate in 2009 from the Uzbekistan State Institution of Art and Culture. She has traveled to Uzbekistan 14 times, including 2 years at the invitation of Uzbekistan State Academic Bolshoi Theater. And in 1995, she founded the Silk Road Dance Company, which performed at the first White House Nowruz celebration, as well as in Uzbekistan, Qatar, Singapore, London, and Toronto. She was awarded the 2003 Kennedy Center Local Dance Commissioning Project Award and delivered the Fulbright Association's Selma Jean Cohen International Dance Scholar Lecture. Gray's new book, Women's Dances of Uzbekistan, Legacy of the Silk Road, was released by Bloomsbury Academic Press on April 18, 2024. She also contributed a chapter on the Silk Road dance forms to milestones in dance history. Her articles have appeared in the Oxford University Press, International Encyclopedia of Dance, the Encyclopedia of Modern Asia, the Encyclopedia of Contemporary Theater, Asia, and the Encyclopedia of Women in Islamic Culture. Gray is the 2021 recipient of Uzbekistan's Friendship of the People's Medal for her work in promulgating Uzbek culture. Most recently, she presented her research, Chasing the Sogdian Whirl Across the Silk Road, from political upheaval to the continued existence of an ancient turning technique, at the 2025 Dance Studies Association Conference. Tai Soon Burgess, the founding artistic director of the Tai Soon Burgess Dance Company, is a leading American choreographer and cultural figure. The Washington Post Pulitzer Prize-winning dance critic Sarah Kaufman writes of Burgess that he's not only a Washington Prize, but a national dance treasure. He founded and directs DTSB-DC, Tai Soon Burgess Dance Company, which is Washington D.C.'s region's premier modern dance company, now in its 32nd season. Burgess creates contemporary modern dance works that explore the joy, sorrow, and beauty of the human experience. In 2016, the Smithsonian named him the first ever choreographer in residence. 3 portraits of Burgess reside in the permanent collection of Smithsonian's National Portrait Gallery, as well as his family archive, which is held at the American History Museum. Burgess has served as a cultural ambassador for the U.S. State Department for over 2 decades and was awarded 3 Fulbright Senior Scholarships for Dance. Burgess is a recipient of the Selma Jean Cohen Dance Lecture Award and the Aaron Stein Memorial Fund Award. His memoir, Chino and the Dance of the Butterfly, a memoir, received a Silver Medal IPPY Award in 2023. Burgess is a professor emeritus of dance and the host of Slant Podcast, which you can find at slantpodcast.com and anywhere that you listen to your podcasts. The podcast is dedicated to conversations with Asian American creatives. And it is just, again, it's such an honor to introduce 2 incredible dance scholars, dance luminaries, and enormous contributors to our capital region's arts and culture, Tai Soon Burgess and Dr. Laurel Victoria Gray.
Thank you. Look, all the people came. This is wonderful. So I'm going to start by talking to Dana. I first got to know him when we were both teaching at Joy of Motion, just around the corner from here. And he had a ballet class that was before my Middle Eastern dance class. So I would come early and watch how he taught, and he was so kind, and he could explain things to his students, and they adored him. But then I found out that he was very much interested in doing some things on the Silk Road, and I went, wait a second, Silk Road is mine. So we had a dance-off, And we had a détente, and we were both doing Silk Road things, but in different ways. I found out that Dana grew up in Santa Fe, and his parents are artists, so I think it's a good place to begin. What was that like?
Sure. I should back up actually for one moment. I should say we've known each other for almost 30 years now, which is pretty amazing and wonderful. I grew up in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and my mom is Korean American. She's part of the first 100 Koreans, that lineage that moved to America, and they were all plantation workers. So what happened in 1903 was Korea was sort of being infringed upon and soon to be taken over by the Japanese government. And so as many people as possible started to escape Korea, and there were under 1,000 people that got out before 1910, before it closed down, and many of them were plantation workers. So my family was on the first steamship from Seoul to Oahu, and for 4 generations they ended up working the plantations there. And my mom was the first individual to go to college, and she went to Cranbrook Arts Academy and became an artist, and that's where she met my father. And they both are, my father's deceased now, but my mom, who will be 95 next month, is an abstract expressionist to this day in a lot of different museums. And so I grew up in Santa Fe in this artist community, and there is where my parents' friends like Isamu Noguchi and many other luminaries of the Asian American community are individuals that I met as a child and sort of grew up with. So that was my background in terms of understanding the visual arts, right? And that's sort of the half of how I came to museums, in a sense.
And your stories in your book are so amazing. Oh, the people that you got to know and how you navigated that space of, because let's face it, Santa Fe at that time did not have a big Asian population. So,
yeah.
Hence your name,
right.
Your nickname.
Right.
So how did you develop your identity as an Asian American?
Well, the memoir really starts out talking about that lineage from the Korean lineage and my father's lineage, and then somehow ending up in Santa Fe and growing up in a bilingual Hispanic and Native American community as a 4th generation Korean American. And what happened was I was a competitive martial artist as a child, and when I discovered dance, that was just perfect for me because my parents were visual artists. I didn't have that kind of acumen for painting or for design. But when I took my first dance class, I just knew that was it because I'd already been doing such a disciplined physical sort of, routine every single day. But what happened was that, and I write about this in the book, there was a moment in growing up where I was playing with a friend, and the friend's grandfather said, oh, Chino, because in a Hispanic community, everyone who looks part Asian is Chino, right? So, and it's difficult to explain Korean versus Japanese versus Chinese, it's just everyone's Chino. And he said, you remind me of the men that used to live here. But the way he said it was so threatening, so I ran home and I said to my dad, what is Mr. Chavez saying? And then he said, oh, Casa Solana, which is the neighborhood that we grew up in, which means the house where the sun shines, essentially, was built over the Japanese internment camp that was in New Mexico. And it was right after the war, it was leveled, and 10 years later, they built my neighborhood over it. But what was very amazing and serendipitous about this place is that the first Asian American choreographer, his name was Michio Ito, that was the last place that he lived in America before he was repatriated to Japan. And so in this odd way, it started me on this journey to search back to the roots of Asian American modern dance and question why the canon was so flawed. And one of the things that we have to understand about someone like Michio Ito is that Martha Graham, who's a very famous modern dance pioneer, danced for him, and she was one of his students. And Lester Horton, who the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater still trains in the Horton technique, was Michio Ito's protege. And yet he's removed from the records because Executive Order 9066 sort of took away the whole archive. So, but this evening, actually, because my company not only does my work, but we do carry on many of the Ito works, we have Alani Serna from my company who's going to perform for you, since we're talking about dance, Michio Ito's earliest surviving work from 1914, and it's called Ave Maria, and he was looking west while we were looking east. So let's see if Alani Serna will come forward, and I'll just move my chair and we'll get started.
And I think it's one reason why I really liked your modern dance choreography, because that flavor of the Eastern martial arts made it closer to what I understood. So here we go. Milestones of Dance, which you edited, and one of the chapters is on Michio Ito, which helps restore his legacy, very important part that got sort of erased from dance history.
And I think what's interesting about the Ito technique is that it specifically trains a choreographer in musicality in a way that a lot of the contemporary field of dance right now, modern dance specifically, has sort of at times lost its musicality, and music becomes an environment. But what's so neat about looking at a piece from 1914 is that you can see how the body is very much a moving musical score, because he studied at the Dalcroze Institute in Hellerau, Germany, actually, before World War I. So very interesting. Yeah.
And music is a very big part of your compositions.
Yes, definitely.
I always thought it weird, like people, like, well, I could do this to any piece of music, you know, my modern dance choreography, but no, you can't. It's opposite of the Eastern thing where it's everything's integrated.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, just speaking about confluence in general, this idea that, you know, having grown up in Santa Fe in this artist community, then going into modern dance, thinking about the structure and the canon of it, it all came together with my dance company. We'll be entering our 33rd season coming up. But what's so wonderful about it is to be able to go from museums, like we just did a commission for the Noguchi Museum recently, and we were just at Krieger just the other weekend here, and we'll be back at the Portrait Gallery soon. But it's the ability to move from museum to performance venue, like any proscenium performance venue, like we do a season down at Woolly Mammoth now, every May. So it's created this wonderful versatility, I think, for the dancers and for the repertoire.
It just adds a whole new layer of the museum experience. It's just not so passive that you're just looking at a piece of art, but you're seeing art unfold in front of them. Yeah, so, okay, what's next in your writing plans?
Well, I'm doing more book signings for the memoir, which I'm very excited about, and I just finished a new book, which will be out next year, and it's just a slightly different genre. It's mystery, so watch out for that. But it does take place with a dance company, and it takes place in Washington, so it should be a lot of fun. Yeah.
Okay. Murder at the Kennedy Center.
Okay.
How can you not want to read this?
Well, Laurel, can I ask you some questions?
I guess so.
Okay, great. I brought some questions, and you know, I would love if you could share with us, when did you first study in Uzbekistan, and how did your experience in Uzbekistan and with Uzbek dance become a lifelong journey? What was that aha moment?
I had studied Russian in high school, which is very rare. And then later I had a chance to go on a tour, a student tour, and that's the first time I was on Uzbek soil, going through the whole of the Soviet Union. But it was when the person who became my teacher, Islamhandus Mohamedova, came to the US on a tour with the Bahor Ensemble, their main ensemble, that I saw them perform in Seattle. Anyhow, her dance, among all these other dances, her solo just grabbed me, and I thought, I have to do that. I understood it without words. There was no explanation for the dance, she just, the way she danced. And so I kept reaching out, I made that contact. It was the days of the Soviet Union. It was very tricky to even get a visa to go over there. It was quite an adventure, but that started me, and she became my ustos, my teacher, for over 40 years. which amazes me. Just, I really like your dance, would you teach it to me? And they were willing to do this. So the more opportunity I had to go there and study, and the trips were at their invitation, at their expense, incredibly so. And you know, just walking through the door at the right time, I guess, but it changed the course of my life.
Oh, great, that's wonderful. In the book, you choose zones of dance. You call them the dance zones to design your book around geographic locations, their features, their dances. Can you tell us about that? I thought it was a brilliant way to talk about Uzbek dance.
Well, Uzbekistan, you know, as it is now, it's like 1924. But before, it had all kinds of other names, Mavranakar, Turkestan, all these things that was incorporated into the Soviet Union. But there are three main political areas that existed before being merged into the Soviet Union. And because of their separate development, they have very distinct dance styles. And what was disturbing to me is that Americans who came in after the Soviet Union would say, well, you know, all their dance, they learned from the Russians. All of their dances are based on ballet. So you're going to have an opportunity very soon here to see a very traditional Uzbek dance, and tell me what is balletic about it when you get to see it. But there are three main zones, the Khwarezm, the Bukhara, and Fergana. So they're different regions, but those are cities connected with it. But it's not just the cities, it's all of the area around it, and all of the geography and the flora and the fauna and all the history connected with it. And I thought that zone allowed for a deeper understanding of this. So I would like for Nilufar, who is actually from Uzbekistan, and in the Silk Road Dance Company, we just had our 30th anniversary, longer than a lot of marriages, I may say. She's going to do a traditional Khwarezm dance, and it involves dancing on a tray. So if you saw, there's a commonality, if you can see with the Ave Maria, how it didn't take up much space. And I think there's maybe some kind of element in Eastern dance where the dance is contained within the body, and you don't have to go running around the stage necessarily. So we can have our musicians.
Aman ey, aman ey, aman. Asirem binevayem bi kesem giriftarem, giriftarem aman. Ömrümde gezmerem gül gülzar seyrine. Asli bahar istemerem bulbul olmasana. Gülzar seyrin nelerem leli gül olmasana. Aman ey aman. Gani dağlar Karlılar kasıt olmaz. Yiğit baş aman bulsan ey. Yarlı olar yarsız olmaz. Aman ey aman. aşığın yüzü aşığı alsa bulmaz Yürek bağır küymesene bir huda yansa bulmaz Saman derdi gök içine yanmasını salsa bulmaz İşkin düştü yürekke çıkarı varsa bulmaz Derya katamgan yaşını kaytarı varsa bulmaz Ala göz boy boy boy kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy kara göz boy boy halim dilber Kanım sırmaz yürekkene 360 damırga 444 süyekkene İşk manası yıktır acıratı alsa bulmaz Ala göz boy boy boy kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy kara göz boy boy Şütmen nebdiler men Kamil muradım bergin Men vazinen tiler men Divane meşrebin men İşk otile güler men Parvaneli buluttum İşk ne ayırsa bulmaz Ala göz boy boy boy Kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy Kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy Kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy Kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy Kara göz boy boy Ala göz boy boy boy Kara göz boy
Okay, so everybody saw that all the ballet movements in this, right? Okay, so see, that's the problem when you really don't know a genre and you go see a stage performance and you see the stage patterns, you mistake it for something that has a lot of stage patterns like ballet, but so do military drills, and this area had much more tradition with military drills. So the costume also is very traditional. Each region has a different costume. The bells, of course, are used in the Karavan dance and also Bukharan dance. The headdress, very specific. Feather has to be on the left side. The jewelry here is very specific. And if somebody can reach that bag that I left behind the counter, I'd love to show you what Uzbek women wore before the Bolshevik Revolution and the emancipation of Uzbek women. So I'm going to put my microphone down for a moment. This is called a paranjat and a tuchva. The tuchva is a veil made from horsehair, woven from horsehair, which is terribly uncomfortable and hot and inconvenient. It's not those little sheer, sexy harem girl veils that you see in the Hollywood movies. So let's get, I'm going to have to take this off for the moment. Just don't leave the hat. So this goes on first. Okay, and remember it gets it's over 100 degrees. And then close it, close it, and then turn around slowly. So these are vestigial sleeves. So obviously they're not to be used, it's just sort of ornamentation. So very drab from the outside, right? You can't tell one woman from another. When you close up, you can't tell one woman from another. But then when you open it up, you see. And that's really like the Eastern society, the Uzbek society, is that the outer is not for the public, but you have a rich inner life. So we're going to liberate her now. So coming soon to Washington D.C. Right? Along with the Handmaid's Tale. Oh, I'm not supposed to get political. No, I'm always political. Okay, thank you, Nilüfer.
I'll ask Laurel one last question, then we'll open it up to the audience. Your book is the first comprehensive history of Uzbek dance. And how are the Uzbeks and how is the rest of the world receiving your book right now?
Thank you. I was very nervous to find out how it would be received here, but 3 reviews that came out in academic journals were very positive. Because frankly, this dance form is not known, so I'm glad that people liked it, and especially the writer in Korea, who's quite an expert on the Silk Road, had a very positive review. Uzbeks are still kind of uncertain because they don't have a lot of facility with English, but about 2 weeks ago I found out that my book is being translated into Uzbek. Yeah, so in about the time of Nowruz, the new year next year in the spring, it should be published in Tashkent in Uzbek. So then I'll find out. I mean, the Uzbeks who knew it and read it, they liked it, but I'm waiting for it to have a wider audience.
Great, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'd like to open it up to audience
absolutely.
questions.
When did you find out that Michio Ito had been imprisoned at the camp under the neighborhood that you had grown up with?
Yeah, I found out really as a child that
I
he.
No, you knew who Michio Ito was as a child?
Oh, I see. Did I know what his impact was on the field of modern dance? No, I really didn't. I had a college professor that came up to me and she said, and she's actually one of America's leading dance history writers, and we're still really good friends. She said, I think you need to know about Michio Ito, and she handed me a book about Michio Ito when I was like 20 years old, and that sort of sent me on this journey. And then here in Washington, I had the opportunity to work with the first generation dancers and second generation dancers of Ito, because remember that the first generation dancers, many of them were interned because they're from California, or they were from Japan. So I was able to, because he was repatriated, so I was able to work with both generations. And that really changed, I think, the scope of my work and how I choreograph, how I think about work. And it also gave me something that I have to pass on, because the way that you receive the Ito works is that a teacher passes them on to you. You learn the technique, you learn the pieces, then you pass them on. So it's very exciting for me whenever I see, like Alani, for example, doing a work from 1914. That was Michio Ito's graduation piece from the Dalcroze Institute in Halle, Germany in 1914. So it's great that they can live on like that, and that there's so much care put into how we coach those pieces so that they remain true.
And I noticed in Ave Maria, this position, which is all through Uzbek dance. This
Yeah.
So it's not
That's
this,
sick.
it's this.
Yeah, it's very much through Asian dance in general, which is really interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
Silk Road.
For sure, the Silk Road. Hmm. And I was thinking, when I was watching Nilüfer and you were placing the whole cloak over her face, it reminded me of, I had toured to Pakistan and the Khyber Pass. Once you pass the Khyber Pass and you go into the tribal lands of Afghanistan up north, all the women are completely, have small netting and they're completely in black. And it's such a shock, isn't it? It's just like all of a sudden you see these spectras or these phantoms that are like desperately moving from door to door to not be seen like in the street. So this is fascinating. Yeah.
We too can experience that here in the US.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
You should be right.
Dana, I know you spoke a lot about some of the incredible trailblazers that you got to meet in your book, as well as many of the opportunities you had to mentor young Asian Americans. And I was wondering how you see this next generation of dancers, of artists, bringing that work forward.
Well, I think that when I was first choreographing, that in a city like Washington, and I talk about this also, that Washington was really considered a black and white city. When we talked about culture, we talked about cultural institutions, it was like, oh, we have like our black dance companies and we have our white dance companies, and there weren't even discussions at that time of Latino like aesthetics. So you can imagine that there was like almost nothing said about Asian Americans. I think because there are more books, there are more movies, there's more presence or bridges that allow for individuals to talk about the depth and breadth and the multitude of perspectives from the Asian American community now, that there's going to be a whole renaissance of Asian American writing, of filmmakers, fashion designers, and hopefully choreographers. The issue that's very, very different is that now I think we understand the nuances of identity better, although we've tumbled back in time in this few last months. But what we understand about identity is that it's not just like me being Korean and American, but it's like there are lots of things that make me like Korean, American, gay, from Santa Fe, lives in Washington, choreographer. All of these things create my identity. And the same thing happens with all those nuances of every single Asian American, every single Latino American, etc. That we're now living in the nuances of stories. And I think that's the exciting moment that I'm looking forward to.
And so I had a question for each of you. I'll start with Mr. Burgess. So on one side of my family, I am a second generation Chinese American, and then on another side, I'm a third generation Chinese American. And so now that I'm older and I'm thinking back at the kind of connections I've made through learning Chinese dance, I realized that some friends that I had made quickly through dance, we actually our like American experience are actually quite different, because if many of them are first or second generation, and there's like over the course of a couple generations, your American experience can change quite like a lot. And so I wanted to ask, as a fourth generation Asian American, whether it's through your like communications with your side of the your family, or like through like interactions with other like immigrant friends, or maybe have other different generations and have different experiences, how did those like affect your choreographies?
So much of our repertoire really comes out of the inspirations from listening to other people's stories. I love to hear about the dancers' lives. I love to hear about their stories. Love to hear about your story tonight, right? Like that's inspiring to me to think about a second and a third generation, and what does the 2.5 mean, you know, in a sense. So what I found is that traditionally within first and second generation, the struggle in a sense of trying to get to the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that pyramid in a sense, to like acquire a home, to acquire an education for children, to acquire a car, to acquire land, and then once that generation has sacrificed for that to occur for their children, then it's like the next generation can consider what it would be to be an artist, right? Because first generation is going to say, well, we've set you up, we want you to feel secure, so you should really follow, you know, being a lawyer, being an accountant, or being like, or being a doctor, right? And then once you've done that properly, then your children can be an artist, or they can be a director, or they can be, and then the grandparents will be really proud of that, you know? So it's really seems to be following this trend in a sense, you know? So what's fascinating to me is this idea of the 2.5. When you have a second generation, a third generation is kind of like, what's that in-between place? If you have second on one side and third on one side, that's really interesting. So yeah, now I'm inspired to sort of research and make a dance. Yeah.
It was really great to see the two dancers today, and I was thinking as I watched it, so you were talking about in your story how you basically learned Uzbek dance straight from the source. Basically, you traveled back to the country, and so now as you're teaching through the Silk Dance Company here in America, and your students many are also have like direct connections to the country. But as you're encountering like the newer generations, like do you feel that the dance style is changing a little bit, or like what is it like working with like younger students?
Well, actually, the Uzbek community in the whole U.S., not my students, but like New York, New Jersey, it's already changed, and they're not wearing the traditional costumes. They're not braiding their hair. They're putting ostrich feathers everywhere and lots of, you know, glitzy. It's like Las Vegas, only modestly covered up, but it's like they got free, so now they're gonna go, so they're all doing experimental, wild, non-traditional stuff, and here I am making everybody wear these old-fashioned costumes, trying to hold the line, but it's like a tree, right? And the roots have to be deep in the culture of origin. And then each year, new leaves will come on the tree. But I want to make sure that those roots are healthy, because they might want to go back to them and know that the tree's not dead. So, but it's changing, and it's changing in Uzbekistan too. So, I'm a holdout.
All right. Well, thank you two so much, and thank you, the dancers in the back.
Yeah, maybe we can have the dancers come back out.
Thank you so much.